I'm Olivia. When I was 16, I believed I had lost everything. My parents died in what I thought was the greatest tragedy of my life, but it was nothing more than a carefully staged lie. For years, my aunt and uncle fed me sweet, hollow words, constantly reminding me that I owed them everything. They told me that even the scholarship I earned was a debt I could never repay. In truth, they had stolen the inheritance my parents left me, buried my future, and built a story that kept me chained in false gratitude. But lies never stay buried forever. The forged documents, the fake signatures, the secrets they thought would remain hidden, I uncovered them one by one. Every mask slipped away, revealing a betrayal colder than any nightmare I could imagine. Once, I was the victim in their game. But not anymore. Piece by piece, I will take my life back. And when the truth finally comes to light, they'll understand the strength of someone who can no longer be deceived. I still remember my first morning of senior year like it was yesterday. I sat in my tiny dorm room, staring at the stack of law books on my desk, the sunlight cutting through the blinds in stripes across my floor. College had been a blur for me, scholarships, late nights, trying to keep up with professors who expected you to know everything and nothing at the same time. My parents had died when I was 16, suddenly and mysteriously. Nobody talked about it much, at least not around me. After their death, I moved in with my aunt and uncle, people I barely knew. They were always hovering, always reminding me that my full-ride scholarship wasn't really free. It was a debt, a way to repay them for taking me in. "Olivia, don't forget where your priorities lie," my aunt would say over breakfast, her voice sweet but cutting like glass. "You should be grateful for everything we do for you." I forced a smile, nodding politely, but inside I felt the tight coil of frustration twisting around my chest. Their demands were endless. Money for rent, money for groceries, money for things they claimed were necessary. I didn't mind helping sometimes, but they had this way of making me feel guilty for every dollar I earned. And every time I tried to push back, they would remind me that they were my family. It was in the quiet moments, when I was alone in my dorm room, that I let myself feel everything: anger, sadness, confusion. I had friends who tried to support me. Sarah, my roommate, was my lifeline some days. She had this blunt, unshakable honesty about her that made me feel like I wasn't completely alone in the world. "You cannot let them tell you what you owe them," Sarah said one evening as we sat cross-legged on the floor, textbooks open but untouched. "You earned that scholarship on your own. That is your money, your future. Do not let anyone make you think otherwise." Jake, another friend from my law class, would often joke to lighten the mood, but I knew he noticed the way my shoulders tensed whenever my aunt or uncle called. "You know," he said one day as he tossed a pen across the room, "if I had a nickel for every time some relative tried to bleed a college student dry, I could retire now." I laughed, but it was a shaky laugh, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes. Then came the day that would change everything. I was working on a class project about inheritance law, sifting through old case studies and legal precedents, when I stumbled upon a file tucked away in the online archives. It was a public record from years ago, something small and mundane on the surface, but the names jumped off the page: my parents. I froze, staring at the screen. They were listed as the original owners of a major technology company, the kind of company that could make someone independently wealthy beyond imagination. And I was listed as the sole heir. My hands shook. I read it again and again, unable to believe it. How could this have been hidden from me all these years? My aunt and uncle had spent so much time making sure I believed that we were just a regular family scraping by, that our lives were ordinary and unremarkable. They had been lying to me every single day. The first person I ran to was Min, my classmate who had a knack for legal research. He was brilliant, always questioning the letter of the law, the fine print in ways most people wouldn't even notice. I met him in the library the next afternoon, clutching the printed files to my chest like they were a lifeline. "Min, look at this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but the intensity in my eyes made him lean in. He scanned the documents carefully, his eyebrows knitting together. "Olivia," he said slowly, this changes everything. You are the rightful heir, and it looks like your aunt and uncle have been cooking the books." The words hung in the air, and I felt a mix of fear and relief. Fear because the betrayal was staggering. Relief because finally there was a path to the truth. Over the next few weeks, I started documenting everything. Conversations, financial records, small inconsistencies in the way my aunt and uncle handled my scholarship. I kept my cool in front of them, smiled when they demanded more money, but secretly I was building a case. I started keeping a notebook, writing down every moment of manipulation, every lie. "You are wasting your time," my aunt said one evening as I returned from class, handing over another portion of my scholarship money. "Your parents wanted you to be obedient. You should learn gratitude before you start questioning anything." I nodded, letting her words wash over me. Inside, though, I was already planning my next move. I couldn't show weakness. I couldn't let them know I suspected the truth. Sarah noticed the change in me. "You are quieter these days," she said, "like you are carrying a secret too big for one person." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I am," I said. Jake chimed in during one of our late-night study sessions. "If you need backup, you know I have your back. You can't fight these guys alone." And I wasn't alone. Min was meticulous, helping me analyze every document, every loophole, every potential legal claim. It felt like for the first time in years, I had a team, people who truly believed in me and what was right. The discovery of my parents' real identity was more than shocking. It was empowering. I realized I had the knowledge, the skill, and the legal standing to reclaim what was mine and to bring the truth to light. And that was the first step toward justice, the first step in a journey I was only just beginning. After the initial shock of discovering my parents' real identity, I felt a strange mix of anger and determination. Anger at my aunt and uncle for lying to me for years, and determination because I finally had a reason to fight, to reclaim not just the money or the company, but the truth itself. I didn't know exactly where to start, but I knew I needed help, and I knew I had to be careful. Min suggested we begin by double-checking the company records. "If they've falsified anything, we'll find it," he said one afternoon as we huddled over my laptop in the library. "Start with the shareholder documents, cross-reference with public filings. Anything that doesn't match is a red flag." I nodded, feeling a surge of confidence. "Let's do it." Hours passed as we combed through legal documents, corporate filings, and old newspaper articles. Sometimes I had to close my eyes and breathe when the weight of it all hit me. My parents had been brilliant people, and someone had stolen their legacy, pretending to be the guardians of a child they were secretly exploiting. Sarah came by one evening with coffee and sandwiches. "You're going to burn out if you keep this up without breaks," she said, setting the food down on my desk. "Also, you need someone to remind you that you're not just a detective. You're Olivia, the law student with a future, remember?" I laughed softly, grateful for her presence. "Thanks, Sarah, I guess I needed that." Jake leaned back in his chair, tossing a pen at me. "You know, if your aunt and uncle find out you're investigating them, they might get creative. Just saying, you need a plan for that too." His words made my stomach tight, but they also reinforced the importance of caution. I started to think about surveillance, discreet recording of conversations, and photographing documents when I was allowed to look at them. Every moment at home became an exercise in subtlety and patience. Meanwhile, I also found myself reflecting on my parents, on the life I had thought I knew. I found old photographs tucked away in a desk drawer I hadn't been allowed to open before. Pictures of my mom smiling at a company event, my dad shaking hands with investors. I realized that not only had my aunt and uncle robbed me of my inheritance, but they had also stolen my connection to my parents' legacy. That made me even more determined to reclaim it. One night, I overheard my aunt on the phone, her voice dripping with false concern. "Yes, she has no idea what she's really entitled to. We just have to keep things calm until we finish everything," she said. I froze, my heart pounding. Finally, a concrete confirmation that they had been manipulating me all along. I whispered to Min later, "Did you hear that? They've been planning this for years." Min's face hardened. "Good, now we have proof that it wasn't just negligence or misunderstanding. This is deliberate fraud." The next few weeks were a blur of research, strategy, and quiet confrontation. I started talking to Ms. Bennett, the lawyer I was interning with. She had started her career defending children in foster care and had a keen sense for injustice. When I explained my situation, she didn't flinch or dismiss me. Instead, she said, "Olivia, the first thing we do is build an airtight case. We document every lie, every financial discrepancy, every moment of coercion. Then we go to court, and we make sure your aunt and uncle face the consequences of their actions." We worked late into the nights together, sometimes sharing takeout at my dorm, going over evidence, discussing strategy. I felt a sense of partnership and mentorship that I had never known before. Ms. Bennett became more than a lawyer. She was a guide through the storm I was just beginning to face. Meanwhile, I had to keep up appearances at home. My aunt and uncle continued their relentless demands, taking every opportunity to remind me of how much I owed them. "Olivia, your scholarship is a blessing. You shouldn't squander it," my uncle said one morning as I packed my bag for class. I nodded silently, hiding the notebook filled with evidence under my clothes. Jake and Sarah became my sounding boards. Sarah would often say, "You can do this, Olivia. They can't win if you stick to the truth." Jake was more pragmatic, always reminding me to cover my tracks and protect myself. "Never let them see you coming," he said one night, leaning against my doorframe. "Keep them guessing, but stay 2 steps ahead." During this time, I also learned more about my parents' company. It was bigger than I had imagined, with multiple subsidiaries and international partnerships. Understanding the scope of what was stolen made me both nervous and determined. I realized that reclaiming my inheritance wasn't just about money. It was about restoring the work my parents had poured their lives into, honoring their legacy, and asserting my own place in the world. One evening, after a particularly long day of research, I sat on my dorm bed staring at the stack of documents. Min leaned back in the chair across from me, rubbing his temples. "Olivia, we've found enough discrepancies to take to court," he said. "But you need to be ready. Confronting them will be personal. They will try to manipulate you, intimidate you, and gaslight you. You need to stay strong." I took a deep breath, feeling a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. "I'm ready. I have to be." That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in weeks. Today feels like the first real step toward justice. I am no longer just a powerless kid caught in someone else's game. I am the rightful heir, and I will do whatever it takes to reclaim what is mine and make sure the truth is known. I realized that this journey was bigger than me. It was about standing up to manipulation, asserting your rights, and using knowledge as power. I didn't know how it would end, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. And that feeling, that sense of reclaiming agency, was intoxicating. After weeks of gathering evidence and building a quiet strategy, it was finally time to take the next step. I remember sitting at my dorm desk, the stack of documents neatly organized into folders. Every paper, every photograph, every recorded conversation represented months of careful planning. I felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. For the first time, I understood the real meaning of taking control of my own life. Min and I had mapped out our approach. First, we needed to confront my aunt and uncle in a way that forced them to reveal the truth without realizing we were fully prepared. "It has to be subtle," Min said, leaning over the laptop as we went through the plan. "We want to see how they react, gather more evidence if possible, but never tip them off completely." I nodded. "I can do that. I don't want them to hurt me or make this worse." Sarah chimed in over the phone that evening. "Olivia, just remember, you are stronger than you think. They have been living off lies for years, and now it's your turn to stand tall. You are not alone." Jake had a slightly different perspective. "Yeah, and keep a backup of everything. If they start getting suspicious, you don't want to be left with nothing. I can help with digital copies and secure storage." I felt reassured. I wasn't doing this alone, and that made all the difference. The first confrontation was during a casual dinner at home. My aunt and uncle had no idea that I had begun piecing together their scheme. They sat across from me, smiling politely as if everything was normal. I decided to probe gently. "I was reading some legal materials today about inheritance law," I said casually. "It's amazing how many loopholes exist, even in well-established families." My aunt raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you are learning law so thoroughly? Good for you." I leaned forward slightly. "Yes, but it also made me curious about our family's finances and the history of our estate. I mean, there must be records somewhere, right?" For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of unease in my uncle's eyes, quickly replaced by a mask of calm. "Of course, records are always available, but you don't need to worry yourself with such matters. That's why adults handle these things." I smiled, pretending to let it go. "Sure, of course, I was just curious." Even in that short exchange, I felt a surge of validation. The fact that they reacted at all confirmed that I was on the right track. Over the next few days, I continued my research, often sneaking into rooms to photograph documents my aunt and uncle thought were private. It felt risky, but I was meticulous. Every picture was cataloged, every note cross-referenced with public records. Min helped me double-check everything, and Ms. Bennett guided me on how to present the evidence so that it would hold up in court. One evening, I confronted a minor obstacle. My uncle had taken some of my notes, trying to intimidate me. I held my ground, speaking calmly but firmly. "If you try to hide or destroy anything, it will only make things worse for you. I know my rights and I have evidence." His face turned red, but he didn't respond. I knew then that I had begun to unsettle them. Sarah and Jake provided moral support during these tense days. Sarah would call me late at night, her voice soft and encouraging. Olivia, don't let them get under your skin. You are fighting for the truth, and that's always worth it. Jake was more tactical. If they ever get physical or try to threaten you, we need a plan. Cameras, witnesses, anything to make sure you are protected. The more I worked, the more I realized that this wasn't just about money. It was about justice, about reclaiming the narrative of my life. My parents' legacy had been stolen, and I had a duty to restore it, not just for myself, but for anyone else who might be manipulated or taken advantage of. One night, I found an old letter my mother had written but never sent. It described her vision for the company, her hopes for me, and the people she wanted to help. Reading it made my resolve even stronger. I whispered to Min, who was helping me organize the evidence digitally, I have to do this. For them, for me, for everyone who could be hurt by people like them. Min nodded. And you will. We'll make sure of it. The first major breakthrough came when I discovered that several documents had been altered with falsified signatures. I could hardly believe it. My aunt and uncle had gone to incredible lengths to maintain their deception. I photographed every page, recorded the metadata, and prepared detailed notes on each forgery. Ms. Bennett helped me craft a plan for the first formal legal challenge. Olivia, we start with a petition. We show clear evidence of fraud and manipulation. This will force them to respond in court. They won't expect a 22-year-old law student to have all of this ready. I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. I had spent so long feeling powerless that the thought of finally taking control was intoxicating. I imagined standing in court, presenting the truth, and finally seeing justice done. Sarah visited that night. You know, she said, I've never seen anyone so calm under pressure. You are going to change the game. Jake smiled. Yeah, don't get cocky, but she's right. You've got this. Just remember patience and precision. They'll underestimate you, and that's our advantage. Days turned into weeks as I continued to prepare, refine, and protect my evidence. Every interaction with my aunt and uncle became a careful dance. I asked questions subtly, noted reactions, and ensured nothing slipped through the cracks. Every lie they told, every manipulation, was quietly documented. And then, one evening, as I was organizing my notes, I realized how far I had come. I had transformed from the timid, overworked student into someone capable of standing up to manipulation, deceit, and greed. The fight was only beginning, but I was ready. I whispered to myself, this is for my parents, this is for the truth. I will not let them get away with this. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I finally felt the strength of purpose coursing through me. I wasn't just reclaiming a company or an inheritance. I was reclaiming my life. The day I filed the petition felt surreal. I walked into the courthouse carrying a manila folder stuffed with meticulously organized evidence, each page a small victory against years of lies. My hands trembled slightly, but I told myself that this tremble was not fear, it was anticipation. I was finally taking action, stepping out from under the shadow of my aunt and uncle. Ms. Bennett met me at the entrance, her expression calm but encouraging. Olivia, remember, today is just the first step. Courts move slowly, but the evidence is on our side. Stay focused. I nodded. I know, it feels like a lifetime of waiting has led to this moment. Inside, the clerk reviewed the petition. I watched them stamp it with the official seal, and a strange warmth spread through me. It was official. I had initiated legal action. From this point on, there was no turning back. The first court date was set for a preliminary hearing. Until then, Ms. Bennett advised me to continue gathering supporting evidence, especially testimonies from people who had interacted with my aunt and uncle regarding finances and company records. I realized I had underestimated the importance of allies. Min, Sarah, and Jake became invaluable, each helping in ways only they could. One evening, Sarah brought over a box of files she had managed to locate in old storage units that had been used by my parents' company. I found these buried in the back of a storage locker, she said, setting the box down on my desk. It's mostly internal reports and correspondence, but it looks like there's more than enough to back up your claim. I started flipping through the papers, my heart racing as familiar names and project titles appeared. This could actually make a huge difference, I said, unable to hide the excitement in my voice. Jake leaned against the doorway, smirking. And it's all legal evidence, right? No funny business. This is us, winning by the book. Min meticulously cross-referenced these new documents with what we already had. Olivia, some of these reports show clear signs of manipulation by your aunt and uncle. They've been presenting falsified figures to cover up assets. This is gold. We started drafting a narrative for court. I learned how to present my story, not just as a fight for money, but as a fight for truth and justice. Ms. Bennett emphasized, "Your voice matters." The more personal and factual your testimony, the stronger your case becomes. Courts respond to clarity and integrity. At home, I had to maintain a careful facade. My aunt and uncle remained oblivious to the extent of my investigation, but their occasional slips only confirmed the suspicions I had already documented. One night, I overheard my aunt speaking on the phone, her voice tense. "She's getting too curious. We need to make sure she doesn't uncover everything." I felt a chill run down my spine. They were aware of something, but they didn't know how much I knew. I whispered to Min later, "They're aware of the threat, but they still don't see me coming. We have leverage." The next few weeks were filled with research and planning. I spoke to former employees of my parents' company, discreetly gathering statements and documenting inconsistencies in the records my aunt and uncle had manipulated. Some were hesitant at first, worried about legal entanglements. I reassured them patiently. "I am only seeking the truth. You will not be implicated. We need honesty to set things right." One former employee, Mr. Thompson, hesitated before speaking. "You really believe a kid like you can take them on?" he asked, skepticism clear in his eyes. I met his gaze firmly. "I have the law on my side, and I have the truth. That is stronger than any fear they can project." Slowly, he began recounting details, financial discrepancies, misleading reports, false signatures. Every testimony strengthened my case, adding layers of credibility that I could present in court. Sarah and Jake helped organize the material, making sure everything was ready for submission. "You've got a mountain of evidence here," Jake said one night, stretching on the floor. "Even if they hire the best lawyers money can buy, they can't spin this." Meanwhile, I began preparing myself emotionally for the confrontation that was inevitable. I practiced my testimony in front of Min and Ms. Bennett, refining my delivery and tone. "It has to be calm, measured, and factual," Ms. Bennett advised. "Emotion is important, but precision wins the case." The preliminary hearing arrived faster than I expected. I entered the courtroom wearing a simple navy suit, clutching my notes and evidence folders. My aunt and uncle sat across the room, faces composed, though I could detect a flicker of unease in their eyes. The judge called the case, and Ms. Bennett began presenting the facts. I sat quietly, absorbing every word, watching how the legal arguments unfolded. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, took a deep breath, and recounted the story, the manipulation, the falsified documents, the hidden truth about my parents. "I am here to reclaim what was taken from me and to bring the truth to light," I said firmly. "This is not just about inheritance. It is about justice, transparency, and honoring the legacy of my parents. They built something meaningful, and it was stolen. I am asking the court to acknowledge that theft and restore what is rightfully mine." My aunt and uncle glared at me, but the courtroom remained silent. The judge listened attentively, occasionally flipping through the documents we submitted. I felt a surge of confidence. This was my moment. I had prepared for it, and nothing could shake the certainty I now carried. After the preliminary hearing, Ms. Bennett pulled me aside. "You did exceptionally well today. You were calm, factual, and credible. This sets a strong foundation for the main trial." I exhaled, relief washing over me. "It's still just the beginning," I said quietly. "Yes, but you've taken control of the narrative," she replied. "And that is half the battle won." Back at my dorm, I looked at my friends, Sarah, Jake, Min, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you," I said. Sarah smiled. "We're just glad you finally see your own strength." Jake grinned. "And don't forget, we're here for the long haul. Next steps, more preparation, more strategy. You've got a whole army behind you." For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was leading, strategizing, and reclaiming my life step by step. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, every careful plan was a brick in the foundation of justice. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The fight was far from over, but I knew something profound had shifted. I was no longer a passive participant in my own life. I had found my voice, my courage, and my allies. And with that, I knew I could face whatever came next. I stepped into the courtroom and immediately felt the weight of the room. My aunt and uncle sat at the defense table, faces hard, eyes sharp. The judge glanced over the files in front of them. Ms. Bennett gave me a brief nod, and I straightened my posture. This was it. The trial began with Ms. Bennett presenting our case. She laid out the evidence with precision: falsified documents, coursed financial transfers, inconsistencies in the records my aunt and uncle had maintained for years. I could see the defense shifting uncomfortably. Every photograph, every report we had gathered was displayed for everyone to see. When it was my turn to speak, I rose, my voice steady. Your Honor, I am here to reclaim what is rightfully mine and to reveal the truth about years of deception. My parents were the rightful owners of their company, and this legacy has been stolen through manipulation and falsified documents. My aunt leaned toward her lawyer, whispering something I couldn't hear. My uncle clenched his jaw. I ignored them, focusing on the judge and the jurors. I went step by step, showing the falsified financial statements, highlighting forged signatures, and explaining how my aunt and uncle had attempted to manipulate me into giving up my inheritance. Ms. Bennett called Mr. Thompson, a former employee, to testify. I noticed discrepancies in reports, he said clearly. I was unsure how to act, but Olivia brought the truth to light. The defense lawyer tried to undermine him. Mr. Thompson, aren't you hoping for personal gain from this testimony? I have no stake in this other than honesty, he replied firmly. I'm here to tell the truth. I watched the courtroom absorb each piece of testimony. Emails were displayed showing my aunt and uncle discussing ways to mislead me. Letters from my parents were introduced, revealing intentions that had been intentionally hidden from me. Every detail built a story of deliberate deceit. At one point, my uncle's lawyer tried to intimidate me directly. Do you understand the severity of accusing family of fraud? He asked. Yes, I said firmly. I understand, and that is why I have gathered every piece of evidence to prove the truth. This is not a baseless claim. Every document, every witness, every record supports it. The defense attempted to challenge the authenticity of the documents. I presented the metadata from the digital files and cross-referenced public records. Every objection they raised was met with clear proof, leaving them little room to argue. Witness after witness testified. Former employees confirmed the alterations in records, the coerced financial transactions, and the repeated attempts to mislead me. Emails between my aunt and uncle revealed discussions about hiding assets and keeping me uninformed. At one point, my aunt whispered to her lawyer, her voice tense, "We need to handle this quickly. She's showing she knows everything." I felt a mix of satisfaction and focus. I was documenting their reactions in real time, which would further support our case. The judge called a short recess. Ms. Bennett pulled me aside. Olivia, you are presenting the evidence with clarity. Your calm and factual approach is convincing everyone. Keep it consistent. When the trial resumed, closing arguments began. I stood and spoke again. This case is not only about inheritance. It is about accountability, about restoring the truth and ensuring that deception does not prevail. My parents built a legacy, and it was stolen. I am here to reclaim it and bring justice. Every document, every witness, every statement pointed to the same conclusion: deliberate fraud and manipulation. I could see the tension in my aunt and uncle's faces. They realized their scheme had failed. Outside the courtroom, Sarah hugged me tightly. You were incredible. You stayed focused and you told the truth. Jake smiled. They had no idea what was coming. You held your ground. Min added, this is just the start, but you've set the tone. They can't underestimate you now. That night, I sat alone with my notes. I felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. The trial wasn't over, but I had proven that I was prepared, credible, and determined. For the first time, I truly felt I was in control of the narrative. I had the truth, the law, and the support of those who believed in me. I whispered to myself, this is my fight, this is my truth, and I will see it through. The next stage of the trial was tense from the very first minute. My aunt and uncle's lawyers tried every tactic to undermine me. They challenged the authenticity of documents, questioned witnesses' credibility, and insinuated that I had fabricated evidence. I knew this was coming, and I had prepared meticulously. Ms. Bennett guided me through the cross-examinations. Stay calm, listen carefully to each question, and answer only what is asked. Don't let them bait you. When it was my turn to testify, I felt the familiar mix of adrenaline and focus. The defense attorney leaned forward, pointing at me. Is it true you secretly took documents from your aunt and uncle's home? Yes, I said, keeping my voice steady. I gathered documents to protect my legal rights. I acted under the guidance of my attorney and followed proper procedures for preserving evidence. He smirked. So you admit to taking property without permission? I met his gaze. I took nothing for personal gain. Every document I preserved was to ensure the truth could be presented in court. The documents are all accounted for and documented. Their purpose is purely evidentiary. My aunt tried to intervene from the defense table, her lips moving as if to whisper something to the lawyer. The judge raised an eyebrow. Counsel, please proceed without interference. Min and Ms. Bennett had prepared each witness thoroughly. Former employees testified to irregularities they had witnessed, missing files, altered financial reports, and coerced transactions. Emails were read aloud in court, showing my aunt and uncle discussing how to keep me in the dark about the company and manipulate my inheritance. One email included a line where my uncle wrote, "She must never know her true rights. Keep the scholarship money flowing and make her believe she owes us everything." I felt my hands clench slightly, but I stayed composed. This was the evidence we needed. The defense tried to suggest that I had exaggerated my parents' ownership of the company. "Can you prove that your parents were actual owners and not just employees with stakes?" the lawyer asked. "Yes," I replied, pointing to certified filings and company records. "These documents show their ownership and my status as the sole heir. Everything has been verified through public records and internal company reports. The alterations by my aunt and uncle are documented here." Witnesses confirmed the discrepancies, comparing original company filings to the falsified versions my aunt and uncle had created. Each revelation drew subtle reactions, tightened jaws, exchanged glances from the defense. At one point, the attorney tried an emotional appeal. "Isn't this just a case of a young adult wanting more than she deserves? Could this be about greed rather than justice?" I shook my head firmly. This is not about greed. This is about reclaiming a stolen legacy, exposing deliberate deception, and honoring my parents' work. Every step I have taken has been to uphold truth and fairness. Emails, financial spreadsheets, and witness testimonies were systematically dismantling the narrative my aunt and uncle had tried to impose. Every attempt at intimidation or dismissal failed because of careful documentation and corroboration. During a brief recess, Ms. Bennett reminded me, "You are doing exactly what you need to do. They may try to provoke you, but you have evidence, witnesses, and credibility. Keep it consistent." When we returned, I faced my aunt directly on the stand. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "Do you really believe you can take everything from us?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. "Yes," I said firmly. "I believe in the law, in truth, and in justice. What belongs to me by law and right will be restored." The courtroom was quiet. Every juror was watching, every eye fixed on the tension between us. My uncle's lawyer tried one last tactic, presenting an argument that I had somehow coerced witnesses. Ms. Bennett countered immediately, showing email threads and meeting logs proving that all witnesses approached us voluntarily. It was exhausting, intense, but empowering. Every document I presented, every witness I guided, chipped away at the false narrative my aunt and uncle had built. By the end of the day, it was clear that the case had shifted decisively in my favor. Back at the hotel later that evening, I sat with Min, Sarah, and Jake reviewing the day's proceedings. "They are rattled," Min said. "Every attempt to intimidate or mislead has been countered. This is good, very good." Sarah smiled. "You stayed calm and factual. That's what's going to win this." Jake nodded. "They underestimated you, and that's what makes the difference. Keep it up." I leaned back, exhausted but determined. I realized something essential. The trial wasn't just about recovering the inheritance. It was about standing up to manipulation, defending the truth, and proving that integrity could overcome deception. As I closed my notebook that night, I whispered to myself, "This is not just for me. This is for my parents, for everyone who has been lied to, manipulated, or denied justice, and I will see it through." The courtroom was tense from the moment we arrived. Everything we had prepared came down to this day. Ms. Bennett and I had reviewed the evidence dozens of times, and every witness was ready. I could see my aunt and uncle across the room, their faces tight, eyes scanning the room for weaknesses. The judge called the session to order. Ms. Bennett stood first, methodically presenting additional evidence we had gathered since the preliminary hearing. Emails, financial statements, and internal memos were displayed, showing beyond doubt the falsification and manipulation my aunt and uncle had committed. Each piece built a chain of proof that left no room for denial. The defense lawyer tried to object to certain documents, claiming they were obtained improperly. Ms. Bennett countered calmly, explaining the chain of custody, the legal procedures followed, and the corroboration from independent witnesses. The judge nodded, accepting the validity of our evidence. When it was my turn to testify, the room went silent. I walked to the stand, hands steady, and began. "I am here to tell the truth. My parents' legacy was stolen through lies and deception, and I am reclaiming what is rightfully mine. Every document, every witness, and every piece of evidence I present is accurate and verifiable." The defense lawyer tried to intimidate me. Are you aware that accusing your own family of fraud is serious and could backfire? I am aware, I said clearly. That is why I have prepared thoroughly and why every claim I make is backed by evidence. This is about justice, not vengeance. Ms. Bennett called several witnesses who had worked closely with my parents. Each testified to the true ownership of the company, the falsified financial reports, and the attempts to manipulate me regarding my inheritance. One former accountant, Mrs. Klein, displayed side-by-side comparisons of official filings and altered documents, highlighting forged signatures. I watched my aunt's face pale slightly. She whispered to her lawyer, but her words were lost in the murmurs of the courtroom. The judge was focused entirely on the evidence. The defense attempted one last tactic, questioning my credibility, suggesting I had a personal vendetta. I met their claims calmly. I have no personal gain beyond what is legally and rightfully mine. My parents' work and their rights were stolen, and I am asking the court to restore justice. Then came the pivotal moment. Ms. Bennett presented an email thread in which my uncle explicitly discussed falsifying documents and concealing assets. The judge read it aloud. The courtroom fell silent. My uncle shifted in his seat, his composure finally cracking. My aunt's face was tense, and I could sense the fear that had been building for months. When asked to respond, my aunt stammered. We were trying to manage the estate responsibly. The judge raised an eyebrow. Responsible management does not include deception or forgery. Evidence shows deliberate manipulation. I felt a surge of relief and determination. Every lie, every concealment, every attempt to manipulate me had been documented, exposed, and challenged in court. Ms. Bennett summarized the case succinctly. Your Honor, the evidence clearly demonstrates that the defendants falsified documents, manipulated financial records, and attempted to deceive the rightful heir. Justice requires that the stolen inheritance be restored to Olivia Hayes, and accountability for the wrongdoing must be enforced. The defense lawyer made a few final objections, but they were weak and unconvincing against the mountain of evidence. I could see my aunt and uncle realizing that their years of deception had finally caught up with them. When the judge adjourned for deliberation, I sat quietly, feeling a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. Outside the courtroom, Sarah and Jake waited. You did it, Sarah said softly. You were calm, factual, and you let the evidence speak. Jake nodded. They underestimated you. That's all they had, and now it's gone. Min put a hand on my shoulder. The truth is on your side, Olivia. No matter what happens next, you've already proven your strength and integrity. That night, I reviewed the day in my journal. The trial had reached its most intense moment, and I had stood firm. I had confronted manipulation, exposed lies, and presented undeniable truth. I realized that reclaiming what was rightfully mine was not just about inheritance. It was about standing up for justice, integrity, and the legacy of my parents. I whispered to myself, this is it. Everything they tried to hide is out in the open, and no one can take that away from me. The courtroom was packed with anticipation. Today, the judge was going to deliver the verdict. I sat with Ms. Bennett beside me, my hands folded over my notes, but my heart raced. Every witness, every document, every email we had submitted had led to this moment. The judge entered, and everyone rose. Once seated, he began to speak. After reviewing the evidence, testimony, and documents presented, the court finds that the defendants engaged in deliberate fraud, forgery, and manipulation to conceal the true ownership of the company and mislead the rightful heir. I felt a shiver run through me. My aunt and uncle exchanged anxious glances. My uncle opened his mouth to speak, but the judge raised a hand. The court recognizes Olivia Hayes as the sole legal heir to her parents' estate, including the ownership of the company and all associated assets. The defendants are ordered to restore all property and financial holdings to the plaintiff, and any further obstruction will be met with legal consequences. Relief and disbelief washed over me. I had done it. Every sleepless night, every hidden document, every preparation had culminated in this moment of justice. I looked at my aunt. Her face was pale, her composure shattered. My uncle's jaw was tight and he avoided my gaze. I didn't feel anger. I felt vindication and a quiet satisfaction that truth had prevailed. Ms. Bennett leaned toward me and whispered, "You did it, Olivia. You proved the law works when you are prepared, truthful, and relentless." Sarah rushed forward, tears in her eyes. "You won, I can't believe it." She hugged me tightly. Jake grinned. "All that planning, all that work, it paid off. You held your ground perfectly." Min smiled proudly. "You stayed calm, focused, and logical. This is your victory, Olivia. You earned it." Outside the courtroom, the media had gathered. I realized that this story wasn't just mine, it could inspire others, especially young people who had been manipulated or denied justice. I spoke briefly to a reporter. This victory shows that knowledge, preparation, and courage can overcome deception. Stand up for the truth, and don't be afraid to fight for what is rightfully yours. Later, in private, I reviewed the company's files now fully in my possession. Seeing my parents' original records, their correspondence, and the plans they had for the future made me feel connected to them in a way I hadn't in years. Their legacy was restored, and now it was my responsibility to honor it. I gathered my friends. I want to do more than just reclaim the company. I want to create a legal aid fund for children and young adults who are being exploited or manipulated, just like I was. Sarah's eyes lit up. That's amazing, Olivia. You're turning your experience into something that will help so many people. Jake nodded. Exactly. You've taken a terrible situation and turned it into a force for good. Min smiled. You've proven that the law can be a tool for justice, not just for those with money or influence, but for anyone willing to fight for the truth. In the days that followed, I finalized the legal transition of my parents' estate. The company's leadership was restored according to their original vision, and I began implementing the legal aid fund I had envisioned. Every child or young adult who had been exploited or denied justice became my motivation. Sitting in my office for the first time as the rightful owner of my parents' legacy, I reflected on the journey. I had faced deception, manipulation, and fear. I had confronted my aunt and uncle, navigated the complexities of the law, and emerged victorious. But more importantly, I had learned the value of preparation, truth, and persistence. I whispered quietly to myself, "This is just the beginning." Their legacy was stolen, but now it will grow. I will honor them, help others, and make sure that no one else has to feel powerless like I once did. And in that moment, I realized something essential. Justice is not just about reclaiming what is yours. It is about using your victory to create a better future for others, and that is exactly what I intended to do. Once the estate was fully restored, I turned my attention to the legal aid fund I had envisioned. I called a meeting with Sarah, Jake, and Min to map out the plan. I want to help kids and young adults who are being exploited or misled, especially when they have no one to advocate for them, I said. Sarah smiled. That's incredible. You're taking your experience and turning it into something that will genuinely make a difference. Jake leaned over the table, pointing at our notes. We can start by identifying organizations already working with children and legal services. Then we can create partnerships and provide grants or legal assistance directly. Min added, we should also document success stories. Showing tangible impact will attract more support and ensure the fund is sustainable. We spent weeks drafting proposals, contacting nonprofits, and designing a structure for the fund. I used my knowledge of law to ensure every grant, every case, and every partnership followed proper legal procedures. Every step reminded me why I had worked so hard to reclaim my parents' legacy. It was not only for me, but to create opportunities for others. Our first beneficiary was a young woman named Emma, age 17, whose guardians had tried to force her to sign over property she had inherited from her parents. She came to us terrified and uncertain. Sitting with her, I remembered how powerless I had felt as a teenager. You are not alone, I told her. We will help you. You have rights and we will make sure they are respected. Emma looked at me with wide eyes, hope slowly replacing fear. You really mean it? I do, I said, and you're going to be okay. Through the fund, we provided legal support, education about rights and inheritance laws, and connections to mentors who could guide these young adults. Watching them regain confidence, knowing they could stand up for themselves, gave me a deep sense of fulfillment. Meanwhile, the company my parents had founded began thriving under the restored leadership. I took an active role, ensuring the original vision was honored while modernizing operations. Each decision reminded me of the responsibility that came with reclaiming their legacy. One afternoon, I received a call from a law student who had been inspired by my story. Olivia, she said, I read about what you did and how you fought for justice. I want to dedicate my career to helping others like you did. I smiled. That's exactly why I started the fund. Keep fighting for the truth and use the law to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Back at the office, Sarah, Jake, and Min celebrated small victories from the fund. Cases won, families reunited, young adults empowered. You've built something that matters, Sarah said, handing me a cup of coffee. Not just a company, but a real difference in people's lives. I leaned back in my chair, reflecting on the journey. I had faced deception, manipulation, and intimidation. I had learned to trust my instincts, rely on allies, and persist through challenges. But the most meaningful lesson was that true strength came from using your victories to empower others. That evening, I walked through the office, looking at the photos of children and young adults whose lives had already been touched by the fund. I whispered to myself, "This is the legacy my parents dreamed of, and now it's ours to protect and grow." Justice isn't just a word, it's action, and it changes lives. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. I had confronted the lies, reclaimed what was mine, and now had the chance to create something far bigger than myself. I had transformed pain and injustice into hope and empowerment, and that was more powerful than any setback I had ever faced. Sitting in my office one evening, I looked out over the city lights and felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The company was thriving under its restored leadership, and the legal aid fund had already begun to impact lives in ways I had only hoped for. But more than that, I had reclaimed my parents' legacy and transformed my own story of loss into one of empowerment. That morning, I met with Emma and her family. The young woman smiled as she showed me the documents confirming her inheritance, fully restored. "I feel like I have my life back," she said, tears in her eyes. "And you helped me do that." "You didn't need me to fight for you," I said gently. "You had the courage all along, I just helped you see it." Across the table, Sarah, Jake, and Min exchanged smiles. "This is why we do it," Jake said softly. "Seeing the difference you make is everything." Over the next few months, the fund grew. We partnered with schools, nonprofits, and law firms to ensure more young adults had access to legal support. Each case reinforced what I had learned about persistence, preparation, and integrity. One afternoon, I was invited to speak at a conference for young lawyers. Standing on stage, I shared my story, from discovering my parents' true legacy to reclaiming it and creating the legal aid fund. "Sometimes life puts obstacles in front of you," I told the audience, "but with knowledge, courage, and the support of those who believe in you, you can turn injustice into opportunity. You can transform setbacks into change for yourself and others." Afterward, a young woman approached me holding her notebook. "Your story inspired me," she said. "I've been trying to help my younger siblings with inheritance issues, but I felt powerless. Now I see that it's possible to fight and win with the right guidance." I smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You already have the strength. Use it. The law is a tool, but courage is what drives it forward." Back at the office, I walked past the framed letters, photos, and thank you notes from families we had helped. Each one reminded me that justice wasn't just about reclaiming property. It was about restoring dignity, hope, and opportunity. I thought about my parents, about the years they worked to build something meaningful. I thought about my aunt and uncle, who had tried to steal it, and realized that facing deception and standing for truth had shaped me into the person I was meant to be. As the sun set over the skyline, I whispered to myself, "This is the life they wanted me to live, not just for myself, but to create change to help others, to make sure justice is more than a word. It is action, and I will keep acting." That night, I sat at my desk, reviewing new cases for the fund. Each one represented a life that could be changed. Each one reminded me that the fight for justice was ongoing, and that every step I took could empower someone else. I realized that my journey, from loss to discovery, from deception to truth, from fear to empowerment, was not just my story. It was a blueprint, a message to anyone who has ever felt powerless. You can reclaim what is yours, confront injustice, and create something larger than yourself. And as I turned off the office lights and walked into the quiet city night, I knew this was only the beginning. The legacy I had restored, the fund I had built, and the lives I had touched were proof that even the darkest truths could lead to hope, strength, and lasting change. I whispered one final time, with certainty and calm, "Justice is possible. Courage is contagious, and the future is ours to shape."